Okay, I've started the recording, Okash.
Hi there, thank you. Hello, everyone. So this is a follow-up session on TFA LTS discussion that we've been having in tech forums before and other forums as well. And so today is basically we will talk about the updates since the last tech forum that we had, and then we will also we'll go through some example, and then we'll basically discuss any questions, any outstanding questions, or any concerns that people might have. As we are looking forward towards, we're wanting LTS to start from November of this year, so we're looking forward towards that. So this is a good time to raise or flag anything that you find wrong or you don't want, to happen. Then this is the best time right now. So since the last tech forum that we had, we basically, Varun and I put together a doc, which we shared on the mailing list. And then there's a discussion on the mailing list as well, very helpful, useful feedback there. The doc is available on the mailing list. So if you haven't already read it, I strongly encourage you to go and read it. It's hopefully it's not very hard to read and it's not very long, but definitely share your comments there on the mailing list as well. There have been offline discussions about resourcing, how this will be run, and obviously we want to do it in a way that's sustainable. A system that doesn't that basically works through different iterations, under different scenarios. So yeah, that's the update so far. So if again, I'd recommend that if you have any questions or concerns, definitely raise them. And if you have any questions today, even just feel free to open your mic and start asking the questions. I won't be looking at the screen right now. I'm just looking at the slides. So if you want to interrupt, just make some noise.
If anything appears on the chat, I'll let you know.
Thank you so much. I just happen to have one screen right now. I'm sorry, but yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
So the example is let's look at, so Varun and I were thinking of this, and we thought, how about we take v2.6 as a starting point of LTS, assuming that was a starting point, how LTS would look like. So we kind of went through this exercise mentally, and that's the example that we will look at today. So again, we can't do the complete example just because there are errata workaround CLs. So if we start looking at each one of them, it will take quite a bit of time to discuss them right now. However, we will go through the overall process, and there was a set of patches for security advisory as well, so we'll look at those as well. So LTS candidates between so these are candidate patches between v2.6 and 2.7 of TFA itself. Now these are just these are candidate patches between 2.6, 2.7, but not up until 2.8. When we do LTS, we will go all the way up to 2.8 because there's one LTS per year. So there are 9 security patches which are all related to this particular CVE, which is Spectre BHP. Then there are roughly 34 ARM IP and platform erratas, and then there are platform fixes as well. So there are quite a few platform fixes. However, we expect the platform fixes to be mainly handled by platform leads, people who own the platform. Those maintainers will then look at the platform fixes, and that would not be an overhead on the LTS maintainers for TFA itself. So the process will be, again, this is kind of repetition, but on top of what we discussed before and what is in the doc, but just to understand this a bit more. So whenever there is a patch, there is a patch, we would basically inform the mailing list of the new candidate patch for LTS. So this is basically a patch arriving on integration branch of TFA. Then we start the review process for CI/CD cycle for the patch. So we make sure that the patch is okay in terms of quality, and it doesn't crash anything, at least on the existing CI/CD for our LTS branch. And then after reviews are complete, merge the patch, bump the minor version number, and update the release docs for LTS, and then announce the new LTS minor version on the mailing list as well. This obviously includes a grace period as well for the patch, and that can vary according to what sort of patch it is. I think a lot of CPU errata patches, they can be done fairly quickly, but then if there's a security advisory that has a much bigger impact, we need more time for that. More time given to people downstream to test and verify it.
Quick question. So where you said, start the review on for the patch, but sometimes we have like a small patch stack, maybe a change is across 2 or 3 patches. So would you envisage we bump for every patch in that stack, or just for the those 3, that sort of functional change?
It's a really good question. So and the doc, we try to cover it in the doc by creating this concept of a logical fix. So a logical fix is basically several patches put together. So when we, for example, if we are talking about CVE 23960, then that that one is basically one single version bump. So that's one logical patch. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Right. So, and then similarly for errata workarounds as well, if there is one errata workaround, usually it doesn't happen, but if that does happen, then again, if it is one errata workaround, we treat it as one logical fix and then go from there. So this is a bit more detailed timeline. So let's say on 22nd November 2021, v2.6 of TFA is tagged. At the same time, we also got a branch, make a new branch for LTS 2.6, which is based off of the head of TFA of v2.6 tag, basically on the master branch. And then and that branch is then tagged as LTS 2.6 RC. And then let's say this is what happened on 1st December, there was a fix errata workaround patch for Cortex X2. We cherry pick it to the LTS 2.6 branch, and then we keep doing it for other fixes as well. When I say other fixes, this is basically we are still in the grace period before LTS for 2.6 is actually released. And therefore we also accept other fixes. No new features, but if there are any fixes, we still accept them. And then after a couple of months, after a month and a half maybe, so in middle of January, we send out an email on the LTS mailing list. It's a 2-week notice that after 2 weeks, LTS will be cut. And then on 1st February 2022, we would have cut LTS 2.6.0, and that would be the official LTS branch based on TFA 2.6. Then from that point onwards, no more extra fixes. We only accept from that point onwards. We will only accept fixes which fit the fixed criteria, the tight criteria that we have for LTS. So that means only security advisories and CPU errata, ARM IP errata, and platform fixes at the moment. And there's nothing else, so we won't accept anything else. If there is, again, this is a recurring question. If there is something that we strongly feel should be part of LTS, but is not within this criteria, then we need to discuss it before we make it part of criteria, and only then accept that. But this is a journey that we're starting out, so we will learn as we go. Right. So once we have on first, let's say on first February we would have released 2.6, then there would have been a few more errata workarounds, and they would have moved the LTS minor version number to some version number K, right? Let's say that's like 3. So if we had 3 different errata workarounds between 1st February and 9th March, when the CVE we were discussing, those patches arrived, right? So inspector BHP patches arrive, and again they arrive in integration branch, and then we know straight away as soon as they arrive that they are candidates for backport. We send out an email notification on the LTS mailing list, and we also give a certain number of some certain amount of time as a notice period. I mentioned 2 weeks here. That's just an example that we can arrive at as we go. I think it depends also upon the nature of the fixes that we are dealing with. But let's say in this case, it requires a bit more testing, and maybe 2 weeks is enough time. Maybe it is not. Again, we want to leave as little as possible to subjective judgment. So my personal preference is that we agree on these times, like what the duration will be. But I can understand it is different because different patches require different amount of time for testing. And maybe that will be one of the few instances where there will be judgment involved, as people will, downstream people will have to voice how long they need to test these patches on the LTS mailing list. So once that whatever that period is, let's say it is 2 weeks. So when that expires, and the patches have been, and in that time there have been no issues with the patches, and there's no regression, and that is coming off from the CI/CD pipeline that we talked about. Then on 12th March, which is then on 23rd March, which is 2 weeks after that notice, the patches are merged in LTS, and then the LTS 2.6.k plus 1 is tagged. So that would be 2.6 maybe 4 if it was 3 before, and that would be it. And then we continue with the same process going forward. And you can imagine if there are multiple branches, then obviously this kind of the sort of work is it's not new. It's just grows in magnitude. It's not like it's any different. It's just that there's more work to do of the same type. So for example, the amount of time that we need, we decide this and make it same for all the branches, and then we kind of just move forward with that. There is a likelihood that in very old branches, maybe 4 or 5 years old branches, there will be merge conflicts, or they will require some other patches before the fixed patches can be applied, and that's understood. And we deal with that when that happens. But preference will be to do whatever that we need to do in order to get the fixed patches in, and also to, as much as possible, to pick the patches that are already in the master branch, and not to have customized patches for LTS branches.
I appreciate that, this is a learning process for us, I guess, really, based on other projects, how they've done LTSs and things like that. And then we need to figure out what's unique required for the TFA. These dates, it's very set. Do you envisage, could we store, where you say like patches merged into integration branches, how do you handle slippages, or do you expect any slippages? I understand things won't go in unless people feel that they are of the right quality, but there's always things that come along. could stall the final integrations or the final merging.
Of course, that can definitely happen, and that's where that's the reason why I think the process will not be completely objective, especially during how much, like when we are discussing how long do we need to before we can actually say that this is the new LTS version. The slippages can definitely happen. I think we can devise some mechanism as we go. Right now, I mean, in ideal case, we will all agree to us to the minimum amount that we need, minimum amount of time that we need. Sorry about the noise. But then as people, if people, more and more people start flagging that this is not good for them, or they are late requests for extension, then we can start thinking about a more defined process for this kind of delay that we need before we merge before we merge the backported batches to LTS branches. I think to begin with, we start with like discussions on the mailing list and then come up with the minimum amount of time that we need and go forward with that.
Okay. I guess this is, although we proposing to do it from the V2.8 release, that the whole thing is a not an experiment, but it's a learning process and it's a journey. And I think I've heard it maybe that the initial one is a pilot or something like that, and people will need to understand that if they consume this.
Right. So I guess, I mean, we wanna start with something rather than just always kind of trying to get there but never getting there. So yes, you're right. This is a learning process, and we wanna start with as close as possible to how we want things to be. And yeah, I mean, the key thing here is to basically provide the support and then get the feedback, like see if that actually is helping anybody, how many people are getting value out of this, and then also to assess the amount of work that is needed to do this sort of maintenance. And I think this kind of exercise where we go through, like, say we assume we started from 2.6 and go forward, we can actually see the amount of work that we will have. So that's kind of covered in this slide here. And I think when we have all this information, we will be in much stronger position to understand LTS and its implications in terms of work that's involved.
I guess one of the points that was emphasized the last time this was spoken about was automation. I imagine there's probably a pretty hefty ramp up time for all of this, given that all of those scripts need to be written. We need to kind of automate it from day one, because I expect doing it manually is going to be far too much work for anyone. Has that been considered?
Yeah, actually, it's a very, very good point. I think one of the major reasons why we want to make it a very objective, the whole process has to be very objective, is one of the reasons is that we can then automate it much better than if it was subjective. So yes, we need to put together some scripts to monitor integration branch and everything that comes into the integration branch. Fortunately, we have those prefixes on the commits, like fix and then in brackets errata, or fix and then security. That kind of helps us. That will be definitely very, very helpful. As long as we enforce that correctly, then our scripts will inform us correctly as well. I think the human element that I see so far in all of this is that will be hard to automate. Will be first the one that I mentioned, which is the amount of time that we give out to downstream people before they can come back and say, okay, there are no regression on our side. And the other aspect of this is backporting patches to very old branches, which might have merge conflicts, and then making sure that those merge conflicts are resolved. And I think those will be hard to automate, but then a lot of other stuff can be automated. Does that answer your question, Chris?
Yeah, that's a great answer. Thanks.
With regards to the amount of time that we have before, before we merge, I think that has to be, we have to bias towards the minimum amount of time. That is because, in systems which are live, for example, on the server side, they would probably want the merges to happen sooner rather than later, especially in a security advisory, which then goes out publicly as well. So, I mean, that's the part where we need to be a bit more careful in terms of how much time we leave LTSs unpatched. So that's my understanding, that to bias towards less time is probably better, because if we bias towards more time, it can be unbounded.
So one thing I think about when I sort of see this, and you look at the V2.6 to 2.7, and at the moment we're just talking about one LTS, but I think the proposal went up to, was it 5 or 7? I think there were some. Is there a decision process that, like if an errata comes in, if we had 7 years worth of changes, some of those erratas may not be applicable. How do we filter out them quickly and easily?
Yeah, that is also one of the questions that we have covered before. I mean, we don't have the answer just yet.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's so. In most of the cases, I think we will have the answer, which is that if LTS candidate patch requires some other patches, then we apply those other patches and then apply the LTS patch. In keeping with the idea of we want LTS branches to be the patches inside LTS branches to be a proper subset of all the patches that are in the main branch, in the master branch. However, in very extreme scenarios where this might not be possible, in that case, we have to think at that point, I guess. We might have to customize patches, especially for LTS branch, but that is an extreme scenario.
I guess ultimately it's the maintainers even though you try to automate the management of these LTS branches, ultimately it's the maintainers making the decision. And I guess in these awkward cases or unclear cases, a position will need to be agreed by the maintainers, and things are backported or not, or what have you, depending on difficulty. It's also important to know how many people, who is consuming this. If it's the more people, of course, the more variation of requirements. But if there's only one company or two companies, it's
Yeah, I mean, there are, right. So I think that's a very good point. There are two models, right? One is to customize the patches and apply them to the 5-year-old, like 4.5-year-old LTS branches, or the other is to just say what if we don't support, what if we don't backport this particular fix because it requires customized patches, and if nobody is bothered about that, then that might be another approach. But whatever we do, I guess we have to make it part of a defined criteria. Right? We can call it charter or whatever we call it, but it has to be well defined, and that has to be agreed upon. And instead of hopefully not going case by case, but going by an established understanding.
Yeah, I think it's important to have some level of documentation support where maintainer decisions have been made, and so they can be quickly identified. if you're just looking at the branch, you can see what's gone in, and then, well, why didn't this go in? And it would be useful, I guess, to understand rationale.
Absolutely. I think we set precedents, and then that's how we go.
Okay.
That's like common law justice systems would basically build precedents. I guess that's probably the right way to go. I would also want to ask if anybody has any concerns with like TFA itself, or what the thoughts are. Is it a good thing? Is it going to be useful or not? To what extent, if it will be useful? That would also be very helpful.
Who are you asking? Are you asking? There's an awful lot of people on here from ARM, and we've got our use case for delivering new features and things like that. But it's you guys that are consuming this.
Can I jump in here, Joanna? I believe we are asking other companies, other people from other adopters of TFA involved in the community effort. How much that would be useful for them, and how much they would be willing also to possibly contribute to the effort. And we still have to discuss how to make this happen, but let's start with the usefulness first. Like you say, ARM is happy to how can I say, make this happen in a way, but we are not the final end user of the LTS concept. So clearly happy to hear the opinion from the other adopters. I can see, sorry to put you on the spot, Eric, but you're always very, present. And what's your view, for example? Have you got, would ST be using the concept of LTSs? Is it something that, tickle your interest, or would you do it differently? What has been proposed, or I don't know, good to hear your view.
No, definitely the LTS concept is interesting, and in fact in our release we pick up for each component existing that is part of our release. We pick up and rely on LTS each time it is possible. And let's be clear, this is something that is I was about to say expected even by our customers. So yes, there is definitely an interest there. Now, what has been presented here and defined makes sense for us. Maybe Lionel, I think Lionel is in the call as well, could comment here. But to my opinion, and also about discussion with Lionel about it, I think it makes perfectly sense here. After, okay, you know the story. This is probably the easiest part, but needed. Don't misunderstand me. After the difficulty will be to discuss how do we organize this and handle this.
Right. Thanks, Eric. That's a useful opinion anyway on the, let's say, technical aspect. Then yeah, we can discuss the different aspects. Any other opinion from anyone else on how this is going to work, a typical walkthrough as Okash just explained? Anything you would see differently?
I mean, one of the things to consider, which I think what I'm considering from my team's point of view, is there an effort that we are already making which will be saved as a result of LTS? And at least in my case, and the people within Google that I've talked to, it seems like the answer is yes. It's a very clear yes, and that's the strongest rationale that we have.
Right.
Yeah, in case it's not super obvious, even for NVIDIA, it makes sense. So that's why I've been collaborating with Okash. And at NVIDIA also, we have certain programs that will definitely benefit from this effort.
Right.
Yeah.
Any other opinion? Anyone else? So if not, I'm not sure. Okash, did you have other slides to present, or?
I just wanted to leave room open for other discussions, any questions, anything that's outstanding. In terms of work, I think we, like in terms of unanswered questions, we've kind of addressed most of them. The ones that are unanswered, they are basically well known. So I guess we can then start looking at what will be the next steps, right? And
yeah,
one of the things that, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things I was thinking, since like, let's say if we want to start in November of this year, and then we want to see the amount of work that it generates and what the nature of work is, what are the problems that we encounter that we didn't foresee, and also be able to kind of get a good idea of the resources that we will need. Would it be a better idea to have two LTS branches instead of just one? Because one might be a bit too lightweight in the sense that just having a single branch might not require enough work to give us a really good idea. But the two branches, we are already kind of, getting into this scenario where we have to kind of look at not just one, we have to, more than, we're getting into more than one territory. And then, it can be 2, 3, 4, but it's different. The nature is different. The nature of maintenance is different if there is more than one versus if there's just one branch to maintain.
Right. Yeah. No, I get your argument, but we're struggling a bit to understand. So, what will be the two branches in your mind?
So, if we started with 2.6 and created an LTS for 2.6, and then we have 2.6 LTS and 2.8 LTS starting from November, right? So LTS for 2.6 will be the main LTS, whereas the one for 2.8 will be the release candidate, which will then be actually cut at the end of January, beginning of February.
So you mean going back historically and picking up a 1-year-old release and saying this is now an LTS, but that means you're starting with the technical depth of things to backport from this year, right?
Yeah.
True, but we release it in the sense that when we release it, we basically in one sitting, like in one go, we can just backport, the 34 errata fixes, 157 platform fixes, and 9 security fixes, right, to 2.6, and then that becomes the LTS.
I mean, if you follow the crawl, walk, run approach, yeah, I'd say you want to start with one, and then naturally, I think it'll become two after a year or after a year, right? So once you go, say, from 2.7 or whatever this is this November, and then next November you'll have another one. Yeah, I'm not sure I see that we have to start with two LTS branches right away.
Right.
I think I understand the intention, right? The intention is we're trying to gather data here on how much is it going to cost. And I guess Okash's point is, the more branch we have, the more consistent data, so we can make some more meaningful decisions. So I see the intention. I also a little bit, I don't know, well, I guess I'm probably in doubt on what you will have an initial steep step to create these LTS backport. So you have to decide what needs to be backported. You have to review 1 year's worth of patches. Maybe they're not so much. There hasn't been much security fixes. Well, some, like you say here, but Yeah, actually, you have it here, right? So the data you have here are between 2.6 and 2.7.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're already starting with some data, which is around 200 fixes that you want to backport back to 2.6.
And that can be done in the sense that, I mean, a vast majority are platform fixes. So, but the errata and the security fixes are the key ones. So if we can send out those fixes on the mailing list, LTS mailing list, asking for any disagreement. If there is no disagreement, we go with those. We just do it them in one kind of one topic, for example.
Yeah.
So it's not, we don't have to track each one of them. We don't have to follow the whole process, but we just do it in once. And then we have, like, on one step, we have V2.6, the LTS 2.6, and we can mark it LTS 2.6 point. Instead of 0, we can mark it as 1, or maybe we can mark it 0. I don't have any problem with either. And then we go from there.
But then for patches that don't backport cleanly, whose responsibility is it to resolve those?
Are you talking about just the 2.6 LTS, or are you
For
talking about
2.6, yeah, I guess going forward we've agreed that it will be up to the patch submitter to resolve those issues. But for 2.6, if we're acting retroactively, then who deals with those issues? Because those patches have already been merged. It's possible those maintainers have moved on, stuff like that.
right?
I think
So, yeah.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
I think you're probably clarifying the same point. I think my understanding is that going forward, if there's a patch that doesn't apply cleanly to an older LTS patch, then it's the maintainer's job to resolve the conflict rather than the submitter.
Okay.
But in case of, and the same applies here as well. So whoever the maintainer is.
Well, I think we are saying we are introducing a concept of LTS maintainers, right? We're not talking about the project maintainers necessarily, are we? So what?
Mm-hmm. The only other maintainers that we care about in this scenario, yes, before going there, yes, we are introducing concept of LTS maintainers. And then the only other type of maintainer that we really care about are the platform maintainers, because all the platform fixes are the responsibility of platform maintainers themselves.
So for those platform fixes, the thing you got to think about, that some of them may be fixes for features introduced between 2.6 and 2.7. So they're not applicable because they weren't a feature at 2.6. So you're going to need the platform owner's assistance, I think, on identifying which ones. I mean, you might work it out, but it'd be nice to have them on board to help manage that list if you're going to do this.
True. And since we are bootstrapping, we can basically just say these are the patches that we are intending. Do you have any problems? If yes, then please update, like, what patches do you want? And
because I think you're asking here that not the platform owners to do this work. Someone else will be doing this work, which hasn't been identified yet. I guess it's one of the new LTS maintainers would be doing this work.
So that's exactly my point. So I think we have implicitly introduced the concept, but probably it was explicit in the document that was shared on the mailing list, if I'm not wrong. But there is a concept of an LTS maintainer or maintainers, which are not necessarily the TFA project maintainers, right? It might be some other appointed person, but someone who decides what goes in or seek for consensus on what goes in, and clearly helps with patches that do not apply. Totally get if it's platform fixes, they have to go through platform maintainers as well. Yep, I agree with that. But there might be, like, the security or the errata fixes that someone knowledgeable with the code and able to put his hands on the code should help. And that's the role, in my mind, of the LTS maintainers, who is the main responsible for keeping the ball rolling here. So now I don't have a strong opinion if you want to start with 1 or 2. I'm only just worried that we haven't yet sorted out who is going to sustain the cost for one? But if we find an agreement and people are happy to go with 2 instead of 1 from this November, I don't have any objections, right? I guess it's a matter of opportunities and cost as usual.
I totally second that. I think, yes, LTS maintainers have a job, 1 or 2, whoever, 1 or more than 1. It doesn't even have to be 2. But they have a job which has to be done distinct from a TFA maintainer. And I think that the idea is, again, that's the reason, one of the reasons why we were asking for like feedback from other partners. If this makes economic sense, if it is saving some engineering time and hence saving some budget, then it makes sense for partners to take part in this. So it is it's a cost benefit analysis that people have to do, I guess.
Are you asking for the LTS maintainers to be the same people for like the 2.6 and the 2.8, or could they be different people? Or
I would prefer them to be the same. The reason being that whenever there is a patch to be backported, that patch has to be backported to all the previous branches. So if we had per LTS branch maintainers, then we probably have a situation where the effort is duplicated between per branch maintainers, because all of them have to understand the patch that needs to be backported and have to monitor the patches, etc., etc.
So eventually, after 5 or 7 years, those people are looking after quite a few different branches.
Yeah, up to 5 or 7 branches.
Well, and wouldn't that also mean downstream validation cost? So, well, depending if you want 5-year support, then aren't downstream folks maintaining and testing out five branches? If you backport fixes, right, to
Yeah.
something that's 5 years old.
Yeah, that's true. But downstream folks will only maintain the branches that they care about. If they care about 5 branches, then they have to test at least, most their testing is. So what would happen without LTS is that they would have to not only backport the patches themselves, they will also have to test those patches, and they wouldn't know if any of the test scenarios that they didn't cover, but the upstream might have covered.
Right. So I mean, it's both, right? So then you have, okay, I guess the downstream cost is the same in both cases, with or without. But then the upstream cost is higher, right, to maintain.
I would say downstream. Sorry, go ahead. I interrupted.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'd say downstream cost is also less if there's an LTS, right? So downstream doesn't have to backport the patches, right? They don't have to monitor which patches to backport. And a lot of framework level tests, right? The tests that cover the framework code and other platforms, those tests are done by the CI/CD system. So they get much more test coverage, the downstream folks. They don't have to do the backport, the actual, maintenance of LTS, like the core part, which is like, selecting the patches and backporting them. That doesn't have to be done by them. So it lessens work on the downstream folks as well.
I think it depends on how the people downstream operate with their downstream copy of the LTS. I'm not so interested in the LTSs in the sense of I'm not downstream, but someone partner A may take the LTS and literally only do these things and no other changes, but company B, for instance, might introduce additional things downstream. In fact, I think I probably would expect them to, but
right, that's a very, very good point, and I think that's where it can benefit the community more, because now there's an incentive not to randomly go around changing the code without pushing the changes or discussing those changes with the upstream. If a downstream person like company, for example, goes and changes, let's say, the translation table API, the library, to fit their one particular use case without discussing it with the upstream, then they have a local fork, and now they are stuck and they have to do more. But if they did discuss things with the upstream and kept up to date with the upstream, then they would get the benefits of LTS, which will reduce their cost.
Yeah, I mean that strictly depends on quality of service upstream, right? If it is slow, you have time to market pressures, then people will end up doing that anyway, right? So it becomes very critical that such changes can make it in relatively quickly.
Yeah,
But
that's right.
That's the case with anything going upstream, right? So I don't think it's a unique problem.
Yeah, true. And
I mean, there is an argument that if the topic gets traction, right, then companies will try to align also their schedule against the publication of an LTS, right? So if things become stable and properly maintained and properly advertised, a bit like the kernel, right? Everyone waits for the LTS to detach their own product branches internally based on that LTS. It's not the other way around, right? Clearly, the kernel people have pressure on putting things in, but at the end of the day, the schedule is pretty much fixed, and it's the industry organizing around the upstream, right? Not the other way around. Of course, at the moment we are not there. Of course, at the moment we are trying to build something. Let me just, we've only got a few minutes left. Let me just put one topic on the table, just because it feels like we're talking with an elephant in the room here, which is the funding conversation, especially for this concept of an LTS maintainer. So there might be some infrastructure costs to be taken, and that's something we're going to discuss next week in the TF.org board meeting with the other board members. But let me just put it on the table. It will be very, very difficult to assume, or it would be unwise to assume that the TF.org project at the moment, for the next 12 months, will decide or will have enough resources to sustain an effort like this, apart from necessary infrastructure adjustments, okay, creating branches, connecting branches to CI and things like that. So that means if we want to start in November, this November, with 1 or 2 or whatever, we have to find a way to self-sustain this effort, okay? Not relying necessarily on the project finance. We can discuss again in the board with the board members. Some of you are board members. We'll discuss next week. But, I think it's not a secret that we are investing in other things at the moment, OpenCI, community management, and so on. So I don't see how for the next 6 to 12 months it will be possible to allocate something to cover this from a TF.org point of view. So we will have to, decide where does the engineering effort come from here.
Matteo, are you talking about, when you talk about infrastructure, I guess creation of branches is easy, but are you saying that the CI support might not be there for the next 12 months? So it's basically...
No. Well, what I said is if the board agrees that that's a good direction to go, and there is some funded engineering coming from elsewhere, we can try and make an argument with the TF.org board to sustain the infrastructure cost, which means connecting the existing OpenCI to the LTS branches. I assume that will be very minimal, right? So that could probably be easy to take home from the board. Something more would be difficult.
Right, and I think that would be a good first step, at least to get the CI support and branch. I mean, branch creation is easy, but this CI support that would come with for the LTS branches. At least we would have some confidence in the patches that go in. Yeah, and anything more, it's again back to the negotiating table, how much we can get from tf.org. But
the problem that I see, and that's we're trying to discuss with Okash and Don, our community manager. The problem that we have at the moment is that we don't have concrete data to put in front of the tf.org board, right? So if we are asked, okay, fine, how much is this going to cost, right? How much mythical month we have to spend for sustaining this effort for this year and or next year? We struggle to answer, right? We don't know. So it will be really hard to sustain this conversation if we don't have concrete data. So one of the options we are thinking is proposing, well, let's try to start in a self-funded way. And when I say self-funded, it means companies that are interested in this concept can collaborate with shared engineering effort to make this happen.
So I think
see how it, sorry, let me finish. See how it goes for 6 to 12 months, make some maths, number of patches, number of branches, and then decide, okay, so to make it long-term or having, eventually 5 branches for 5 years, we need, I don't know, 1 full-time engineer a year or 6 months of an engineer a year. I don't know, random numbers, right? But if we can get to these numbers, then we can present for the next fiscal year, which, just to remind yourself, the tf.org runs from October till October. So it will be a conversation from October 23. How do we fund it within the boundaries of the project? And hoping that many people will join the project in between to sustain that.
So there's 2 types of funding as I see it. There's funding for services that trustedfirmware.org is offering, whether that's funding for the CI or people's time in some other manner, other things. And there's also funding by, the way the project works today is a lot of engineers from different companies spend their time, their company time. And I guess the CI is the obvious thing from a trustedfirmware.org service. And I guess the other funding is effort from those people who want this to happen to be help with the maintainership of them.
Yeah, that's basically what we're saying. Now, again, we'll discuss next week with the board. Don't expect a magic wand solution. That's just what I'm saying. Okay, the topic of how we're gonna, who is gonna put down the engineering effort for making the backports, deciding, reaching consensus, basically who is gonna cover the LTS maintainership role, will remain an open question. And we might suggest that the community itself, tries to cover that role for the time being, gathering data with a goal of presenting concrete data to the board or to the members in 6 to 12 months for a future funding by tf.org. At the moment, we don't have any data, and it's also a bit too late because we are basically approving the budget for next year, part of the board. So there is also a timing aspect, which would be really, really difficult now to approve anything in the next 30 days. So yeah, that's where we are.
Right, and I think that's a reasonable ask, at least for the initial 1 year until we get data for fixes and how much effort goes in and all of that. So I think that's a good middle ground until the next meeting. And on the same lines, do we have data on the availability of the platforms or the cycles that are available to run the CI tests on the platforms that are already present in the Lava system or the OpenCI? If those are 100% occupied, then I think there is a counter argument saying that we don't have cycles to run on those boards, so we cannot support these LTS branches. Do we have?
So today the OpenCI, it's got FVP models is the primary test platform. There's Juno boards there, and which are ARM boards, but they're not real platforms, as in deployed in downstream. I'm not aware of any others at the moment that are actively. I think some are being looked at being added, some partner platforms, but today they're the platforms that we have in the OpenCI.
It sounds like what we really need is sort of 1 year of proof of concept, right? Sort of nominate these LTS maintainers, get going, create a branch, start supporting it for the next year, collect all the data, including things like whether there's cycles available on the CI, what it would take to do it. Right? And I guess then we will be in better shape for next year to provide more data and get, funding that Matthew was talking about. Otherwise, there's always going to be a chicken and egg problem, right? We're waiting for somebody to approve, but yeah.
Yeah, totally agree. And I'll just add one thing, that even this effort has to be funded, right? So it's not going to take off if we don't pull in our weight, knowing that it's going to add value. If we think it's not going to add value, it's a different story, but we think that's going to add value, and then somebody else will do it, I don't think that will work. So we are perfectly capable of maintaining it internally, everybody on this group. So we can always go back to that model, and then none of this will then happen. So we have to pull in our weight to make it happen. It's up to us, I guess.
Right, and that's our plan B, I guess. So maybe next week, plan A would be hashed out, and if that is rejected, there is a high chance that will get rejected. I think that's what Matthew is saying. So yeah, we'll come back to plan B. But I think that's a reasonable ask, at least from our side. It's something that can be done. Supporting supporting for whatever initial 6 months or until the next October.
So I could see that, in November, because that's only less than 2 months away now, that if we can identify the LTS maintainers who are going to maintain this, whether it's for the proposal for 2.6 and 2.8, or whether it's just for 2.8, you could do a branch, and then you could maintain that branch. You may not have a CI for it initially, but you can follow the process of erratas and security fixes and platform changes. Getting the CI is probably more difficult, I would think. But I guess we would also want to see, or I would always want to see that platform owners or platform owners are willing to step forward and be the maintainers of this LTS branches.
I would say sorry, I just wanted to add to my previous point. I mean, if we have CI coverage, then there is high likelihood that we will have better quality in the LTS. If there is no CI, then sure, platform maintainers can cover their own platforms, but then what will happen to FVP and the platforms that's already present in the CIs?
I agree to that. I second that. I think CI has to be there, mainly also not just that we get more testing, but if we are trying to understand how real LTS ultimately will look like, then getting CI in place is crucial.
I don't deny that. I guess what Matteo is trying to do is who's going to fund that.
I guess in terms of CPU cycles and memory, like the compute part of it, I hope that we have some buffer on the servers to run these tests. In terms of the person who will set these things up, that is, I think, unresolved question, but I honestly don't have any understanding of how the So if I were to help, become one of the maintainers now, then I wouldn't have any understanding of how it works, basically. So somebody who has some sort of understanding of how the CI/CD system works probably will be best placed to modify those to include the LTS branches.
I think, I think the answer is going to be folks who are interested will have to spend some time learning it and possibly working with the current, ARM maintainers for CI to try and steal a few cycles for this purpose and get at least, sort of proof of concept quality CI in place for this LTS branch, right?
Yeah.
At least the message I'm getting is that there's nobody to do it. The only people are going to be the LTS maintainers and potentially some ad hoc support from ARM or from the rest of the community, right?
Well, I guess there's two ways of paying for this. It's people, which is what you've been talking about, and I guess it's hard cash. So that the support organization that helps us run trustedfirmware.org can fund and additional people who are experts in CI and those things.
Yeah, but I would have thought we already have people who do that, people who maintain CI/CD right now.
Yeah, but they need to be paid for.
Of course. But I mean, for this initial effort, I don't know who else is better placed. But like, if we're trying it, seeing it for 1 year, how it plays out.
Yeah,
I'm not sure who will be better placed to do that.
I think Matteo's dropped, but I don't look after the budget for trustedfirmware.org. I think that's what Matteo drives and things, or helps drive. Anyway, we've overshot. I'm happy to continue, but I guess people are going to have to start dropping if they've got other commitments. Where do we go from here? People are dropping off now. Do we have another session of this? Do we have a special session that those who are interested? I can still record it, but our next session is in 2 weeks. But I've already got something potentially lined up for that. How do you want to progress this, Okash and Varun? This is your proposal.
I guess we've had like enough time for this to cook, and then there's mailing list as well. If somebody has any specific concerns with the type of LTS that we are going for, or they don't like it, then they can voice it there. Haven't heard any strong resistance to it, but obviously we've heard a lot of positive opinion. So I guess the next step would be, like Matteo was pointing out, looking at the resourcing aspect and see how we get started with the actual LTS, and then if there is a reason, we can have another tech forum discussion or separate discussion. I'm happy.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm more than happy to host either a special session in a future tech forum or a special one-off session at a different time if we need to do things quicker.
Sorry, at least from the NVIDIA side, we don't have any representation on the board. So I would be interested to understand, what happens in 1 week's time. So any forum is fine with me, email or a special session. It's just that I would like to understand that piece of information so that we can devise the next steps.
I think what I can say, I'm not on the board or anything, but partners and contributors who really want to make this happen, you got to look to see whether you can donate people for the maintainership roles, if you're really interested in this, to help manage these branches, and also support financially trustedfirmware.org if you really need the CI in place, and if we don't have the funds, or Trusted Firmware doesn't have the funds to put that in place right now, they're the two things I think that need to be identified people and potentially further funds for trustedfirmware.org to help fund the management and the setting up of the CI.
Sounds good.
All right, it's coming up to 10 minutes past. If there isn't anything else that we want to talk about here, we can take it to the mailing list, and I will send out the recording, or I'll make it available on the trustedfirmware.org site, but I'll let everybody know on the mailing list once I get it all uploaded and everything. It's been a good session, guys. I mean, it's...
One question, Joanna. So I think Okash sent out a PDF as an attachment to the email, but is there any place we can host it on tf.org?
Yeah, we've got this wiki or fabricator
Yeah.
System at the moment we're using. I think we're looking at possibly replacing that in the future, but that I can help you guys create an LTS page if we haven't. I can't remember if I think we've already got one, haven't we? That you set up.
Yeah.
Perhaps we could host it there and attach it there and share that on the mailing list as necessary.
Right. Okay. Just wanted to absorb the recent feedback and publish an update to the document.
Yeah. No, I think that page that you created is probably the best place. I think it is the LTS. There's an LTS page, fabricator page, I think.
Sure, I'll do that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys, and speak to you all on the mailing list.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, guys.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.